Coast. She thought the Husky was acting clingy because of the new baby. She was a new mother, 8 weeks postpartum, running on interrupted sleep and the particular exhaustion that comes from caring for something that needs everything from you without being able to explain why. Coast. She did not have the cognitive bandwidth for two mysteries at once. She chose a simpler explanation. She was wrong, and she came very close to paying for it. Coast. Priscilla Avery had a baby named Ozzy. 8 weeks old, born 3 weeks early, healthy by every metric the NICU team applied before discharge. He was the reason her house felt different. Not cluttered, but inhabited in a new way, occupied at a frequency she had not previously understood. Coast. She was learning to read in the way you learn a new language, by total immersion without instruction. Her husky, Finn, was 3 years old, silver white, 63 pounds, and had been in the house since before Ozzy existed. He was not a dog who cuddled. He watched. He kept his own counsel. Coast. He had been introduced to Ozzy with the kind of careful formality that first-time dog owners enact when they have read enough online to feel responsible. And he had responded with the reserve of a dog who was interested but not overwhelmed. Coast. On the night that started all of it, a Tuesday, week 8, Fenn did not go to his bed in the living room. He sat beside the bassinet. Coast. Priscilla assumed this was the new baby adjustment that dog blogs described. Dogs who had been the sole focus of a household's attention could sometimes reorient their position-taking behaviors when a human infant arrived. It was normal. It would resolve. Coast. Wednesday, he was there again. By Thursday, he was not sitting. He was lying on his side on the floor beside the bassinet, pressed close, his head raised periodically to bring his nose near the edge of the bassinet, near Ozzy's face, inhaling. Coast. Priscilla's husband, Jonas, was working nights that week. Coast. She was alone with the baby and the dog, and the explanation she had arrived at, which was that Fenn was experiencing a version of new sibling adjustment, that he was finding his place in the changed household by locating himself near the thing that had caused the change. It was a sensible explanation. It was also wrong. Coast. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you are in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. On the 6th night, Priscilla woke at 2:43 without understanding why. She lay still in the dark and listened. Coast. The baby monitor showed nothing alarming. She heard the absence of sound and then the dog. Fenn, in the other room, making a low-sustained vocalization she had not heard before. Not a bark. Something below that, persistent, like a sound with a purpose rather than an impulse. She went to the nursery. Coast. Ozzy was in the bassinet, awake, not crying, making small sounds that were different from his usual nighttime sounds. His breathing was audible in a way it hadn't been. Coast. Not dramatic. Not the gasping she had been warned to watch for. The slight wheeze, barely perceptible, the kind of thing that, in the daytime noise of a house, you might not notice for another day or two. Fenn was at her heels. Coast. Priscilla held Ozzy. She felt his chest. She pressed 2 fingers gently to the skin between his ribs and felt the very slight recession that her postnatal nurse had told her about in discharge instructions she had read once and filed in the back of her mind, under eventually useful. Coast. Intercostal recession. The sign that breathing was requiring more muscular effort than it should. She called the after-hours line. She described what she felt. The nurse said bring him in now. Coast. RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, the respiratory virus that in a full-term healthy toddler is a difficult cold and in a premature infant in the first weeks of life is an entirely different conversation. Ozzy was 8 weeks old. Coast. He was born 3 weeks early. His respiratory system was doing work it was not yet fully equipped to do efficiently. Coast. Dr. Amara Osei, pediatric respiratory, reviewed Ozzy's oxygen saturation and his breathing patterns and told Priscilla he needed to be monitored and supported. That his trajectory, absent intervention, had a direction that she was glad to have interrupted. Coast. She looked at Priscilla and asked what had brought her in at 3 in the morning when the symptoms were still subtle. Priscilla said, the dog wouldn't stop. Dr. Osei said something Priscilla has carried with her since. She said dogs can detect changes in breathing chemistry before the visible signs arrive. Coast. The shift in oxygen-carbon dioxide exchange ratio, the subtle change in exhaled air composition that precedes clinical decline in respiratory illness. These are detectable to a nose like a dog's before any monitor you could put in that room would register them. She has been beside your son for 6 nights. Coast. She was reading something. Has your dog ever kept a vigil over your sleeping baby that she couldn't explain? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Toast. Ozzy was in hospital for 4 days. He came home on a Saturday, an apnea monitor attached for the following 3 weeks, his oxygen levels stable, his breathing easier. Coast. Fenn was in the living room when they arrived. He did not make a production of it. He looked at the baby, walked over, pressed his nose briefly to Ozzy's face, and went to his mat near the window. Cursed. Priscilla stood in the hallway and watched the dog settle and thought about the explanation she had arrived at on night 1. New sibling adjustment, repositioning behaviors, finding his place in the changed household. Coast. Fen had found his place. He had found it on the first night, on the floor of the room where a premature baby was breathing in a way that was not quite right. And he had stayed there because the reading he was taking every night was still not resulting in a direction that made him comfortable to leave. Ghost? On the 6 nights he sat there before she woke on night 7, she had given him a different story. He had remained at his post regardless. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never ask for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Ghost. Ozzy is 18 months old now. He is healthy, loud, walking, recently converted from observer to participant in the ongoing relationship between himself and a husky who still sleeps with, one eye toward him. Jonas says Fen is a different dog since Ozzy arrived. Priscilla says he is exactly the same dog. Coast. That is what makes it so hard to look back on the week she read him incorrectly and feel anything but grateful it didn't cost her more than 6 nights. Coast. What Fen did the first time Ozzy had a fever that wasn't responding the way fevers should, and how Priscilla recognized the signal this time, is a story coming after this one.